Okay, how about it now? We're in the top 5 of my fantasy playlist, July 30th, 1989, and if it were up to me, this song would be top 10 or top 20 on Billboard's Hot 100, deserved to be a hit. This group, they never had a top 40 hit until the lead singer left the group, and then ironically, a song of theirs went to number 11 on Billboard's Hot 100, but I'll get into that in just a minute. 10,000 Maniacs. The song Trouble Me got it up to number 5 on my fantasy playlist, up 4 from number 9. Fantasy playlist, July 30th, 1989. I remember I was working at a nightclub restaurant. Well, there was a restaurant one side of the building, and there was a nightclub that I worked at. A disco, we'll just call it a disco, mainly for adults 25 to 50, on the other side of this restaurant nightclub combo. And I remember there was a lovely waitress who worked there. Her name was Tina. About 18, 19, 20, 21. My goodness. God, those memories just come back. I remember her just standing there at the DJ booth. Black hair, brown eyes, very attractive woman. Tina was her name. And we used to talk about 10,000 Maniacs. I think we were both into 10,000 Maniacs. They were one of the cool bands to listen to back in the late 80s, early 90s. Uh, they were sort of more on the mellow spectrum of what we would call alternative music now. 10,000 Maniacs. Natalie Merchant, when she auditioned, become a member of the band. Now, they weren't known as 10,000 Maniacs at the time. Actually, they got their name from a 1964 gory movie. The movie was called 2000 Maniacs, and since they had 5 members at the time, they called themselves 10,000 Maniacs. Natalie Merchant, the lead singer, she was 17 when she auditioned. And she got the role. Got to be lead singer of 10,000 Maniacs. She was 10 years older. 10 years younger rather than the rest of the group members. 17 years old. They had developed a cult following, but it wasn't, well, actually, they signed with Elektra Records. They developed enough of a following to sign a major record deal with Elektra, 1985. And their first album, the album was called, I wrote it down, it was called Wishing Chair. It didn't do well. But the critics, they loved the album. This band, they had the talent, but just didn't sell very well. Elektra then, oh my goodness, I didn't know this. Elektra hooked 10,000 Maniacs with Peter Asher, producer Peter Asher. Peter Asher had a hell of a career. Started out with Peter and Gordon back in the 60s. Boy, they came out with those nuggets. World Without Love, which was written by Paul McCartney. Actually, Peter Asher's sister was going out with Paul McCartney back in the 60s at the height of Beatlemania. They were the boyfriend, girlfriend, Jane Asher and Paul McCartney for up until about 1968, 69, but that's behind the point. 1964, Peter and Gordon's World Without Love, and Nobody I Know. God, check out that drum fill on that record. And I Don't Want to See You Again was another one they did in 64. 1965, they rolled in I Go to Pieces and I Want to Cry, one of their biggest hits written by Dale Shannon. And they covered True Love Ways, a Buddy Holly record from the 50s, and they covered another 50s classic. They covered, well, they called it To Know Her is to Love Her. It was a cover of the Teddy Bears, To Know Him is to Love Him. And then they came back in 1966, Lady Godiva, and there was, oh gosh, a woman, which woman was actually written by Paul McCartney. And then used to be one of my favorites when I was growing up by Peter and Gordon, Knights in Rusty Armor back in early 1967. Peter Asher then moved on into the production side of the music industry. He was with Apple Records, the Beatles record label, head of artists and repertoire. He signed James Taylor to the Apple record label, and later, well, more or less brought James Taylor to the States and recorded Sweet Baby James. He recorded that album, became James Taylor's manager, recorded Sweet Baby James in California, in Los Angeles. James Taylor, well, one of the biggest albums, James Taylor. And Peter Asher, by the 70s, he here's the deal, he helped crafted the 70s California sound back in the 70s as he was producing albums, mega albums by Linda Ronstadt. Remember Lonely Boy by Andrew Gold, one of the quintessential California classics, uh, which came out in 1977, produced by Peter Asher. He produced two albums. He produced the first big album by 10,000 Maniacs, and that album was called, just bear with me, folks, my notes are all over the place, In My Tribe in 1987, and then there was Blind Man Sue in 1989. And it's since 10,000 Maniacs, they were a little bit folksy, no surprise that they were produced by Peter Asher, he produced Linda Ronstadt and uh, James Taylor, particularly on the folksy side. Well, anyway, going back to 10,000 Maniacs, I remember the first video I saw by them. I believe it was in the fall of '87. It was, they covered Peace Train by Cat Stevens. That was pretty stark right there, because I remembered the original version, bringing back those memories from the fall of 1971. They did a good version, did a pretty decent version of the Cat Stevens record, but their first hit record, well, it wasn't a real big hit on Billboard's Hot 100, and just hold with me, Like the Weather. Yes, I loved Like the Weather in 1988. Definitely one of the cool records to get into back in the late 80s. That went to number 68 on Billboard's Hot 100. Their next single was considered their breakthrough, although only got as high as number 80 on Billboard's Hot 100, but it did well on the modern rock charts, which I guess now we would call the alternative charts. What's the Matter Here in 1988? Also from that album, produced by Peter Asher, In My Tribe, a song about child abuse. That's the thing about Natalie Merchant. Sometimes she got into that social commentary. Now we go to Blind Man Sue and Trouble Me. Yes, indeed, Trouble Me, back in the summer of 1989. And that went to number 44. That didn't do too bad on Billboard's Hot 100. And they came out with 1992. Those Are the Days. Oh, that's a lovely record. That went to 66. And they did a song in late '92 and early '93. Candy, it had Candy in the title, but I can't remember the exact title of the record. Natalie Merchant, she wanted to pursue a solo career to fully develop her creative vision, because her creative vision was a little bit different from that of the other group members. And Natalie Merchant, she left 10,000 Maniacs in 1993. And interestingly enough, around the time she left, they had their biggest hit, their live version. They did a live version of Patti Smith's Because the Night. That went to number 11. I remember that was played pretty heavily back in the fall of 1993. That was on my fancy playlist. That Natalie Merchant, she goes solo. Carnival, late summer, fall of 1995, went top 20 on Billboard's Hot 100. Actually, I wrote down the chart positions of those records that she came out with just for the heck of it, and I lost it. I know I wrote it down here somewhere, but I lost it. Dadgummit. Here it is. Oh my God, Carnival went to number 10. It was a pretty big hit. If I remember correctly, the video was in black and white. I remember watching that on MTV. There was Wonder. Wonder was definitely, although it didn't do as well, it was actually more commercial than Carnival. Just, gosh, it just sounded great on that. Jealousy in 1996. And remember the powerful, almost the plaintive, Kind and Generous back in 1998, 1999, which went top 20 on Billboard's Hot 100 by Natalie Merchant. Actually, Natalie Merchant enjoying more, somewhat more superb commercial success as a solo artist than she did when she was in 10,000 Maniacs, as far as Billboard's Hot 100 is concerned. There's one other thing I want to mention. Peter Asher thought highly of Natalie Merchant. That is no small beans. I mean, Peter Asher by the '80s, this guy's a legend. Part of a successful British invasion duo in the '60s, and a massive producer, producing hit albums by Linda Ronstadt in the '70s, producing Sweet Baby James, and actually he produced some other albums by James Taylor as well, and I wrote those down somewhere, but I won't get into it now. Peter Asher said something to the effect, he liked the way she sang. He liked her voice. But when it came to working with the band members, now this is very interesting. This is, if you want to get into the music business, something to consider. Working with a real band was different for Peter Asher than working with session musicians. With a session musician, you say, okay, this is what I want you to play. I want you to play this note exactly like this and let it go into the verse or something like that. Whereas with a band, he said that you have to be a little bit more tentative, a little bit more diplomatic. You know, if you can play something like, instead of saying, just play this note here, it would sound good if you play it here. It'd be more like, it would sound better if your guitar fill or your drum fill fell into this place or something like that. Well, anyway. Alright, I've been rambling. Ramble Gambling Man. Just call me Ramble Gamble Man. Well, the Rambling Man. Alright, we got 10,000 Maniacs at number 5 on my fancy playlist, July 30th, 1989.